Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever actually stopped to think about what, legally and economically speaking, makes a tax a tax? I mean, it's a word we hear literally every single day, right? But defining it precisely, well, that takes a little bit of structure. So welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to break down the core characteristics of taxation by looking at its four foundational pillars.
To really lay the foundation for our analysis, we need to look at how the experts define it. There is this classic, highly authoritative definition from the economist Seligman. He defines a tax as a compulsory contribution from a person to the government to defray the expenses incurred in the common interest of all, without reference to special benefits conferred. Okay, I know that is a brilliantly precise definition, but wow, it's a bit dense, isn't it? So we're going to go ahead and unpack exactly what Seligman means. To do that, we've got our four visual checkboxes for this explainer. 1. Compulsory contribution. 2. Personal obligation. 3. General benefit. And 4. No quid pro quo. These are the four load-bearing pillars that support the entire concept of taxation.
And that brings us to Pillar 1, compulsory contribution.
The absolute first thing to grasp here is that taxes, they are definitely not voluntary donations. They are completely mandatory payments made to the state. But you might be wondering, what actually triggers them? Well, this mandatory contribution is demanded from people based on a few things, like the income you've earned, property you own, or certain economic activities you're carrying out. Basically, if you earn, if you own, or if you do business, this mandatory contribution kicks in.
And look, because it's mandatory, it is flat out not optional. If someone simply decides they don't want to pay their taxes, they become liable to legal action and are absolutely subject to punishment by the government. This is a defining trait, guys. It is an inescapable requirement of participating in the economy, strictly enforced by the law.
Moving right along, we hit Pillar 2, personal obligation. So what does this actually mean? It means taxation places a direct, personal duty right on you, the taxpayer. It is your individual responsibility to pay exactly what you owe and, crucially, to avoid tax evasion. It's not just some broad, abstract idea floating out there. It's a direct, binding line of legal duty between the individual person and the state.
Which naturally leads us to Pillar 3, general benefit.
Now you might be asking, where does all that money actually go? Well, taxes collected by the government are spent for the general common welfare of the people, and this brilliantly illustrates a key point. They are not paid because an individual has received some specific personal gain. Instead, all those funds are pooled together to maintain society as a whole, rather than serving just one specific person's personal interests.
Now, what's really interesting about this next foundational concept is Pillar 4, no quid pro quo.
Let's define this clearly because it fundamentally separates a tax from, say, a standard market transaction. No quid pro quo means there is an absolute absence of a direct give-and-take relationship between the government and the taxpayer. Think about it. When you buy something at a store, you hand over money, you get an item in return. That's a direct give-and-take. But with taxation, a taxpayer cannot claim a definite, direct, and proportionate personal benefit back from the government just because they made a payment. It just doesn't work that way.
Let's look at a super concrete example. Think about the amount of income tax you paid to the government this year. You absolutely cannot go up to the government and demand an equal proportionate benefit or specific services in return for that exact payment. Your contribution goes straight into the general pot. It does not buy you a specific tailored slice of government services just for you.
All right, let's pull all of this together. Our four visual checkboxes are complete. First, taxation is a compulsory contribution, meaning it's mandatory and enforced by law. Second, it's a personal obligation, which is a direct individual duty not to evade. Third, it's for the general benefit, spent on common welfare rather than rewarding specific individuals. And fourth, no quid pro quo, meaning there's no direct proportionate return for your payment. Together, these four load-bearing pillars successfully frame the legal and economic definition of what a tax truly is. And honestly, it brings us all the way back to perfectly understanding Seligman's definition we started with, which leaves us with this final, really fascinating thought to ponder. Since taxes demand compulsory payment with absolutely no direct return to the individual, how do we best measure the success of the general welfare they're meant to create? It's a provocative question for sure, and it perfectly bridges Pillar 4 and Pillar 3. Plus, it's the absolute key to understanding how governments evaluate their public expenditure. I really hope these core concepts have helped you build a rock-solid understanding of taxation.
Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep asking those big questions.